Welcome everyone. My name is Diana Mayfield and I'm the head of content here at Design Files. Today we are chatting all things client collaboration with Misty Molloy. Misty is the founder of CoCreative Interiors and the visionary behind CoCreative Collective, a comprehensive business system empowering interior designers to achieve six-figure success without sacrificing their sanity. Pioneering the CoCreative Method, Misty fosters a uniquely collaborative design experience by involving clients strategically throughout the entire process. Welcome, Misty. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm really
Yeah.
passionate about collaborating with clients, so I'm really excited about this presentation.
I'm excited too. It's like such an important topic because it's, it goes through every part of the process, can make your life easier, low stress. We're all about low stress over here and, enjoying your projects. So I'm excited to dive in. I am going to let you take it away with the workshop, and then I will pop back in when it's time for Q&A. Before I go, just want to tell everybody, if a question comes up at any point, please just, pop it in the comments. No need to wait for Q&A. So if anything comes up, just pop it in there and we will get to it when we can.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. So, as I mentioned, I'm really excited for this topic. I came across this graphic actually several years ago now. I don't know if you guys have seen it before, but it's this graphic that basically lists out the different prices for design. And it starts with, I design everything at the lowest price point, all the way to you design at the highest price point. And I think the sentiment behind this graphic is the idea that the more involved a client becomes, the harder the process becomes, and therefore the more expensive it becomes. And I would like to make the argument that involving your clients actually makes your job and your life easier than what we often think about when we consider involving our clients or involved clients that we didn't ask to be involved, making our job and our lives harder. My name is Misty Molloy, and I am the founder of CoCreative Collective. I founded CoCreative Interiors in 2019, and I started my business with the intention of collaborating with clients. That was very central to the heart of my mission from day one. It's why we're called CoCreative Interiors. I wanted to co-create with clients. And that was very intentional, partly built around something that I would have liked to have had if I had been working with a designer. I knew what I liked and I knew what I wanted, but I often felt like it would be really helpful to have somebody come alongside me to help me make decisions so that my home felt like me. And as a designer, that's saying something, because I feel like I should be able to make decisions for myself and for my own home. But we all know it's always harder when it's your own space. And so I wanted to be able to provide that experience for my clients of involving them while being the expert in the room and helping them to think through all of the things they don't think about because they're not the designers like we are. And I wanted it to be fun. Design should be fun. We know it can be stressful, but I think if we are able to involve the clients at the right times, it can really be a fun process, both for them and for us as well. I also really wanted to build a business that helped me work smarter, not harder. I mean, we've all heard that cliched term before, but it's cliche for a reason. And I felt when I first started my business, things were so much harder than I expected them to be. And I have a master's degree in leadership and organizational change. I have been in the corporate sector for over 20 years. Much of that time was spent in strategic initiatives. So something that I was very familiar with doing, but design just seemed really hard to me. And it took me a couple of years to figure it out. But collaboration is really the key that I found to making the process a lot easier and to make it feel as though I was working smarter and not harder for a change. So just think back. I think this will be helpful for you guys as we continue through this presentation. Why did you start your design business? Like, was there a very specific reason as to why you went into business? And then, are there specific goals you have for your business in terms of your lifestyle, for example? Do you want your business to operate in a certain way to help support your lifestyle goals? And I know we all start our businesses for our own reasons, but what are those specific reasons to you? So The problem with involving clients was it made my life harder. And obviously this is going against what I originally thought. I was thinking to myself, well, if I involve clients, it will make things a lot easier. It turns out that it was not as easy as I expected. And I found myself gravitating away from involving my clients because I began to understand why this idea of keeping your clients at arm's length was prevalent in our industry. I felt like I didn't have a system for keeping things in control. And as a result, I was ending up having a lot of revisions or a lot of questions that I wasn't prepared to answer, or I felt like I wasn't being very transparent, but I was afraid to be transparent because I didn't know what the client would think. And I was honestly just trying to avoid some of the hard conversations and the hard situations I was finding myself in, but actually made it and end up being even harder. So I started to pull away and go the opposite direction of collaboration, and honestly got to the point where I just felt like if I didn't figure something out, I wasn't going to continue with design. I loved it, but it was driving me crazy. But I loved it so much, I knew there had to be a better way of collaborating with clients and just having a design process in general. So I ended up going and doing a lot of research. I invested in coaching. I invested in courses, all the different things to try to figure out how exactly can I provide design services in a way that is fun and not nearly as stressful as it was making me stressed out. So when I did research and signed up for these courses and working with coaches, I came across what I consider to be the standard method, like how most designers seem to be providing design services. And you'll see there's 9 steps I've listed here that I think are pretty typical. The ones highlighted in bold are the steps of the process where I felt like I was having to do a lot of one-on-one in-person support oftentimes with the clients. And it just felt like there was so much back and forth. And I felt like I was trying to be a mind reader in a lot of situations, especially in terms of aesthetic, what they were hoping to see and that type of thing. And so I wanted to go back to the drawing board and figure out how I could condense this standard method to make it something that worked a lot more smoothly and, quite frankly, took a lot less time, while also helping to avoid some of the roadblocks that I was hitting again and again with clients, mainly with communication and a lack of communication sometimes, and then with having unclear boundaries and expectations for my clients. So instead of doing this step-by-step process, I flipped it a little bit and reduced the number of steps by creating what I call the CoCreative Method. It's what we use in Co-Creative Interiors as our design process. So instead of having 4 different parts of the process that are more in-person or client-facing steps of the process, we have been able to reduce it down to 2. And actually, that's even a little misleading because I don't even always have to collect project information in person either. Sometimes the client will do that. It just depends on the type of service that they've opted for selecting. So we'll walk through the differences between the old method and the new method, and I'll give you tips on the co-creative process throughout, as well as things you might want to consider when you're building out your own process. So before we dive into the details, this is the ultimate formula I want you to keep in mind. Transparency and collaboration equals trust and buy-in. So ultimately, at the end of the day, what you have to be able to do for your clients is build trust and buy-in. And if you are able to build that trust and that buy-in, you are going to run into far fewer problems because they view you as the expert and they trust that you have their best interests in heart. And these 2 things of transparency and collaboration, I think, are the ultimate keys for gaining their trust and their buy-in. And so we'll talk about what is transparency, when does it come into play, and then the same thing with collaboration. When does the client collaborate, and how do we keep that on the tracks instead of going off the rails as well? Okay, discovery calls the old way. So this is my experience. It may or may not be yours, but when I was initially doing discovery calls the old way, I felt like I was often trying to sell them on why they should work with me. And we would talk about timelines, which we all know is somewhat crazy because timeline can very rarely be dictated by what the client wants. It often is dictated by our availability, contractor availability, a number of different things. So it's like, why are we discussing timeline in such detail when we really have no idea whether or not we're going to be able to meet certain timelines until we are further along in the project? Same thing with budget review. We would often get into some of the nitty-gritty details of the budget when you didn't really have all the details to be able to have that conversation. And then I would find myself trying to give them a full walkthrough of my process because I wanted them to understand that my process was very well thought out and planned. But I felt like it ended up becoming overwhelming rather than helpful. They were just like, yeah, okay, this is great. But I was talking at them rather than talking with them. So the new way, this is where the collaboration comes into play. Really focusing on building connection with your new potential client, just getting them excited to work with you. Ask them questions instead of giving them information. Ask them what they want to know. I like to put this in the mindset of asking questions so that they can basically convince themselves that they need to hire you. So for example, tell me more about why you're reaching out to an interior designer as opposed to handling this project on your own. And, the answers might be something like, I just don't have time, or I know what I want, but I have no idea how to pull it all together. All the different reasons people call us. And then using that information to continue the conversation so that effectively they are explaining to themselves why they need to hire you, as opposed to you having to convince them that you're the person for the job. And then providing a high-level overview. So yes, I still ask about budget. That is important, although, half the time they have no clue what their budget should be. That's one of the reasons they're calling me in the first place. I'll give them a high-level overview of the process without getting into a lot of the details unless they ask. Obviously, if they ask, I'm happy to answer questions. But more important than anything is establishing this connection from day one, which will just help the relationship moving forward. Proposal development. I hated developing proposals. They took me forever. I procrastinated on them because I felt like they were just so overwhelming. And I often found myself going to an on-site consultation and driving there, making sure I had everything ready for the consult. Didn't always need that information, I found out. Gathering extensive information, measurements, photos, questionnaires, all the things when I was trying to develop a proposal. And I didn't have any templates at the time. I didn't have a template for creating a budget, for example, or determining my design fees. I didn't have a proposal template that I could very quickly update with just key pieces of information. So I wasn't having to recreate the wheel every time. Even my contract, I didn't have a contract that directly supported my proposals. So as a result, the contract process was hard. Once I got the proposal developed, that was all good and well, but then I had to also go through and update the contract as well. It was exhausting. So the new way that I do it now, I actually switched to a virtual assessment. And I did this for a couple of reasons. Number one, it goes back to collaboration or co-creating with your clients. We do a virtual assessment where they walk me around their space, typically with an iPhone, and I tell them I want them to give me a walkie-talkie review of their home and their spaces. Tell me what it is you love, what you don't love, what pieces do you like, what makes you happy about the space, all of these kinds of questions. So they are really involved in helping me to develop their proposal, and I can get very specific on what it is they're asking me to provide. So for example, someone will make a comment when we're looking at a family room and I hate this sofa. I bought it only a year ago and it's already pilling and it's stained and the kids jump all over it and it just has not held up well. That information is helpful for me to be able to create a furnishings budget because obviously a sofa that's going to last a year and has no performance fabric is much different than a sofa that is going to last 3 to 5 to 7 years and has performance fabric. So again, having them tell me what they want and what they need and their pain points allows me to build a proposal that is directly in line with what they need to have what they would consider a successful design result outcome. I only get the necessary details. I don't get measurements anymore. That doesn't matter unless they decide that they want to move forward with the proposal, right? Like people would want me to do these consultations and we would tour the entire house and I would get all this information for all of these rooms, and then end up designing 2 of the rooms. So doing the virtual assessment has allowed me to get only the information we need to create the proposal, stripped out a lot of unnecessary time. And then I developed templates and tools. So I have a budget calculator for every single room with good, better, best that I complete based on what the client is telling me that they want. And a lot of times I'm actually able to do this during the virtual assessment. I'll have it pulled up on my computer and be entering the information while they are walking me through their space. And it's a lot faster for me to provide the information they need at the end and put it into a proposal for them. And the same thing with having a template for their proposal. I think my proposal is 24 slides or something of that sort. And I update, I think, 3 slides, 3 out of the 24. The rest is become very process oriented, so it stays the same. And I just update the things that are specific to that specific project. And then, yes, time is money, right? The faster we're able to do things, the more that we're able to make just in terms of profitability, but then also we make a little bit more on our sanity as well. Budget estimates, the old way. This is one of my favorite memes when your client asks if you can do it cheaper. So the old way I used to develop budgets, but I would do it on my own. I would develop it by myself, which is, different from the virtual assessment way of walking the client through the different pieces they're going to need. I would give minimal details, partly because I wasn't exactly sure what to include in the budget, but also because I didn't want to scare the client away. We sometimes had to put together really big number budgets for clients. And I felt like if I gave them all the information, they would be like, oh, that's too much. It's more than I was expecting. And it would just turn them off. And then limited scope preview. So what I mean by that specifically is now when I work with a client and we're doing their virtual assessment, I get information on, for example, whether or not they want built-ins. Do they want wallpaper? Are they interested in custom drapery? Or are they interested in off-the-shelf curtains? Are they looking to do any sort of renovation, whether it's switching out tile on a backsplash, anything of that sort? And I work with my partners that I've identified to put together at least a baseline for what the different parts of the project are going to cost. So my part is separated out, my design fees and what they can expect to spend in furnishings, but I still provide the information that they need to be able to make a decision about their entire project as well. So previously it was limited scope. I didn't go into all that. It was my part, nothing else, and didn't give them all the information, I think, to make a well-informed decision. So the new way, we develop their budget together. So this goes back to that virtual assessment when we're walking through their space. They're telling me what they need. I am able to look at the space and get an idea of what I think that space is going to need, just based on, kind of a general layout, that type of thing. And when we walk through that and we develop it together, they're clear on why I'm putting together the proposal for the budget. We've already discussed it basically. And I give line by line details. So when I do a budget for, let's say, a family room, I list out every single item that I think they're going to need for that room. Obviously, that's not perfect. It's a little bit art, a little bit science, but at least to give them an idea of these are the things that I think you're most likely going to need. These are things that we may or may not need. But overall, this is how I came up with the number for your specific budget for this room. And then the total scope preview. So as opposed to doing just my information, as I mentioned previously, I give them the total scope for every person that's going to be involved in that project so that they have a big picture perspective. I really did not want them to get to the end of the project or the middle of the project and feel like you told me this was going to be a $50,000 project and it's $100,000. Like, this is vastly different from what we originally discussed. It just felt icky for me. And so I would rather be completely upfront and transparent in the beginning so they know what to expect than have to explain myself and get into sticky situations further down the road. It might mean I get fewer projects, but at the same time, the projects I have, I know the client is fully on board, and I just feel so much better about the projects and the processes. All right, conceptual design. This is really where CoCreative Method starts to come into play. So the old way with the conceptual design process, you would design solo. I would pull together this initial conceptual design for them based on their questionnaires, inspiration images, anything of that sort. And then when I would meet with them, the goal would be to defend the vision, basically, telling them why I've put together what I put together, what makes sense about the design plan I've created. Almost again, trying to sell them on their design instead of helping them to be involved in the process. And then I would go back and I would make changes later once we had had a discussion about the conceptual design to see if we were on the same page. I would go back to the drawing board if needed and make updates according to their feedback. So I like this Photoshop, read client's mind. It'd be great if we had a button that could just read our clients' minds. Anyway, all right, this meme dates me a little bit for those of you who don't know Vanilla Ice, but his words of stop, collaborate, and listen are really at the heart of the co-creative method. So the new way, we design with our clients and we discuss the vision and we make real-time changes. So this means that before we go out to see a client for the first time, we have created a floor plan and an initial design storyboard for the project. And this is where I might go and see a client one time, sometimes two times, but I might even just have to go one time. If a client is not doing full service, like they just need a plan, then they are responsible for gathering all the measurements on their own and their photographs. We have a guide that we provide for them to be able to do that. If it's a full service client, we go to the client's home to take all of the measurements and photos for them so that they don't have to worry about managing that part of the process. Either way, we go ahead of time and gather all the information so that we can put together a conceptual design plan. When I say design together, we essentially take the information that we've put together and we discuss the vision. So we give an explanation as to why we've started where we are, like this is our starting point and here are the reasons why. But then we talk more about what is it that your vision is for the space and give us your input on how you see these spaces functioning for you. And then we'll make real-time changes. So if I've put together an initial floor plan, it's likely because I think that's the plan that makes the most sense for the space, right? Maybe one or two floor plans make the most sense for that space. Having these discussions in real time allows me to be able to get to the heart of any objections a client may have before we continue too far down the line. So it's essentially the whole goal of this is to get their objections now, and that way you're not having to go back and make revisions later when they didn't really tell you everything that they felt when the time was more appropriate. We do real-time changes. So if somebody wants to see something different in the floor plan, we'll pop open design files and we will make the changes they have requested or that they think they might want to see. And very quickly, it's easy for them to see why we've not chosen the option they have requested. I had one client who wanted to keep a rug that she loved, and it just was not the right size. And it didn't matter what we did. It was never going to be the right size for that space. And so by showing her the floor plan with that size rug that she had, as opposed to what we were recommending, she immediately was able to say, okay, I see why it makes more sense to do the bigger rug. And that was the end of that discussion. If there are other changes we need to see, like I might present, for example, wallpaper, because that's something that people have a very big reaction to one way or the other. And I'll say, here are 3 wallpaper options that I think might work really well for your space. They often will choose one of the 3 options because we've narrowed it down for them. But if they're like, you know what, none of these wallpaper options are working for me, we will pull open one of our wallpaper vendors and select a wallpaper option together. So selecting these really big pieces that dictate design direction are super helpful, because then when we go back and finish all of the design plan for them, it's a lot easier for us to fill in the blanks because we know that the big pieces that are going to make the design have already been selected and approved by the client. Design delivery the old way. So before, when I did not do this in a collaborative manner, I had so many revisions. It felt like I was just always going back and forth, even with a revision limit. You know, I still offer my clients 1 full round of revisions as a part of my contract. And even though I was happy to do 1 full round of revisions, it was truly often felt like 1 full round of revisions, as opposed to, can you change 1 or 2 things? And then I would also often order multiple samples. And so I would bring samples with me to the initial conceptual design meeting to give them an idea of where I was thinking that we should be going. It was just a lot of work ordering samples. If you order samples, you know that's very time consuming. And then just also the management of the materials themselves. And then I would give a detailed presentation of the final presentation at that point in time, which is also time consuming. The new way, have much fewer revisions. They've already signed off on those big pieces. So there's not really as much for them to have to ask to change, just because we've already mostly nailed down those big details. Much fewer sample orders, because I only order samples for the things that they actually want to see in person. So if we've ordered a specific wallpaper sample, or if we've settled on a specific wallpaper, I will order that sample and that sample only so they can see what it looks like before committing. But I'm not ordering samples on samples on samples to give them an idea of what may or may not work. It's really only the ones that they want to see before making a final decision. And then I am often able to deliver their design virtually. I might put together a Loom explaining some of the videos, or explaining via video some of the changes that we've made. Every once in a while, I'll have to have a follow-up design meeting just to review all the different design elements. But I would say probably 80% of the time, I am able just to send the final design files file over, even for full service clients. And then I'll mail all of their samples to them so they can have them in hand. But I don't have to go back and forth with a presentation at that point any longer. Once we get to this point, it's a matter of just ordering all the pieces and waiting for them to come in for installation. So that's the CoCreative method in a nutshell. The fine print, I do want to say this and make a point of saying this. Collaboration does not mean loss of control. And I think that's one of the big things people get scared about when they hear the word collaboration or talk about involving clients is, how can I do that? Things are going to go off the rails. I'm going to lose control. You will lose control whether or not you're collaborating if you don't have a system. So the only way that the CoCreative method works, or really I think any design system works, is if you have those processes in place. So you need to develop your method. So I want you to go back and think through these questions for yourself. And again, you can jot down the answers and then help to develop your method. So this is where I started when I developed CoCreative Method. This is where kind of the building blocks for that method. Define how you want to work. How do you want to work? Do you want to be on site doing project management? Do you like helping build houses from the ground up? Do you prefer no demo reno? Do you like doing furnishings only? Are you an e-designer? You want nothing to do with going into a client's home at all. You have to start with how you want to work, because if your business doesn't work for you, you're not going to be happy and your clients aren't going to be happy. Once you know how you want to work, you can narrow in on your ideal client. So for me, my ideal client, I call them professional plate spinners, right? They're the typically women who are wearing all the hats, doing all the things. They know what they want. They have a great sense of style. They're successful, and they have a vision for their home. They just need someone to help them pull together all the details. Once you have developed your ideal client, then you'll know how to put together a process that works for them. One of the reasons the CoCreative method works so well for my ideal client is because they don't have time to have a million meetings, right? They would prefer a virtual design presentation because it's one less thing that they have to do. They can review the presentation on their own time. They would prefer to have fewer measurement meetings, conceptual design meetings, just all those things. It just makes it so much easier for them. We involve them when it's fun, which is during the collaborative conceptual design phase. And then the rest of it we handle for them without having to pull them in unless they have specific questions. So then you define your process based on all of those different factors. Your service levels. I think one of the most helpful things that I did for my business was deciding how I operated. So I basically have 3 levels. I will either consult with you, where you get my time only, and that's it. There's no homework or anything. It's literally just the design advice. You can get a plan only, where I provide you with a full design plan, which we deliver via design files with shoppable links. Or you can have full service design, where we handle every single part of the process and order everything for the client, the works. Once I developed those service levels, it was so much easier for me to determine how long it took and the different steps of the process. So then I was much better at determining pricing and putting together proposals and contracts, because it supported those service levels instead of having to reimagine the process every time I had a new client come to me and ask for services. A communication plan. The communication plan is, I think, one of the most important parts of the process. If you are communicating to your client and keeping them up to date on what to expect, they are much more likely to, again, trust you, because they like, she's got this handled. She answers questions before I even ask them. That's one thing I would really challenge you to ask yourself when you are putting together your process, or when you're thinking about your stuck points, is where am I continually getting questions from clients, whether it's potential clients or active clients, because those are areas where I need to improve my process to make sure that everybody's on the same page. As a fun tip, I have a friend of mine who works in copywriting, and she gave me this tip, and it's been phenomenal. She said, just create a frustrations notebook. So anytime you're frustrated by something, or your client seems to be frustrated by something, write it down in your frustrations notebook, and it will give you the information and really help you to be able to identify trends, to see what's working, what isn't working, and how you can address those issues. And then create client guides. So tell your clients through a beautiful guide what to expect along every step of the way. We have onboarding guides, we have welcome guides, we have offboarding guides, we have a warranty guide. There's a lot of guides that, again, we don't have to update every single piece of information, just the parts that are specific to their project. So much easier to just update it and send it out and be done with it. Once you've developed your process, then you can define your systems and your software. So I have client management software, I have project management software, I use DesignFiles for my design, and just knowing what I need the systems to do is important for you to be able to identify those systems. And then finally, the last thing, once you've worked out a lot of the kinks, is implementing automation. And that's really a game changer. I have everything set up in Dubsado. So the minute let's say, like, for example, it will automatically remind clients that they have an upcoming design presentation or design delivery, and that they are required to pay their invoice prior to receiving their design. And it does it automatically just based on the date that I've set for their design delivery. So automation can really be a game changer. And it keeps things from falling through the cracks, because the system is handling it for you. So you don't have to remember to communicate with the client and make sure that you're staying on top of that communication flow. So truly, coming up with this co-creative method and the systems and processes that support the method has been a game changer for me and for my business. And it was what I used as the basis for Co-Creative Collective. And I developed it because I know that there are so many people who are like me, who are like, just tell me what to do. If you just give me the system, I will work it. Just not having the time to be able to do it was a challenge. But figuring this out has been so helpful. I knew I had hit the jackpot when I had a client at the end of one of our design sessions say, that's it? And I was like, yeah, that's it. She's like, that was so easy. That was so much fun. And I was like, okay, this is actually going to work. So it's been a complete game changer for me. And I would just encourage you guys to stop and take the time to figure out what your system would look like, because it can ultimately change the game for you as well. And that's it. It's a co-creative method in a nutshell.
I'm back. Awesome. That was great. I really love the getting aligned on the bigger pieces. I think that's such an easy actionable takeaway, like the wallpaper example, right? Where you're or those centerpiece, like the sofa, right? Like those big pieces that are going to affect so much of the styling and decor. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So we are going to dive right into some questions. So yeah, I think people are really curious about your your templates. So maybe you can speak to a little bit about do you have a course? Do you how do you kind of share those things with designers, their templates and guides and stuff?
So because it truly is a system, like the parts and pieces don't really work well without having the entire system in place. The collective is designed to provide this system for you. And one of the things that I think makes the Co-Creative Collective different is that we implement the systems for you. So my background in systems implementation is where this really kind of came to life. I never set out to create this system. It was something that I created for myself because I felt like things were way more difficult than they needed to be. And so when I put all this together, I was like, I think this would be a lot easier for me just to put together and provide for other designers who are feeling the same stressful situations of not being able to know what to do when. So basically they're a part of the collective, and if you join the collective, then we implement the systems for you. Right now they're not available separately.
Okay, makes sense. So when it comes to when you're getting aligned on some of those big decisions, somebody was asking is that a virtual or an in-person meeting? How do you if you're not presenting the entire design, what are you presenting and what does that look like?
That's a great question. So you can do this virtually. I prefer to do it in person just because I think the experience is more fun for me and for the client and allows me to see the space in person. So, for example, if I'm doing a plan only and they have provided me with the measurements when I go for this initial conceptual design meeting and we're collaborating together, I can verify their measurements to make sure that what we're putting together is actually going to work. And then sometimes, when you see things in person, it's just a lot different when you see it for yourself in the space than it is if you're walking through it virtually. Some of my clients are only going to be virtual because they live across the country, and that's just the nature of the different types of clients that we serve. But even then, I will basically walk through the same process with them. We'll just do it via Zoom, and I will share my screen so they can see the design boards I've created. This is where DesignFiles, again, makes it super easy because I can show them the floor plans on DesignFiles and the mood boards on DesignFiles. So when we screen share, they're just seeing the DesignFiles boards. And then we'll work together that way. You can do it either way. It really doesn't matter. And the co-creative method can be implemented for anybody who does e-design all the way through full service design. This is really focusing on the front end of the design process. So once you get to the part of design delivery, really whatever happens after that is up to you and how you want to work. If you are an e-designer and that's where that stops, it works all the way through. If it stops and then you're going to continue with implementation, the design process itself still is the same.
I also really like how, this comes from a place of empathy towards your ideal client and how much clarity you have around your ideal client. That, these are women that do have design opinions, right? It's not not all men, but some men, it's you do it and I'm going to like it and it's going to be better than what I could do, right? Where it's a lot of women, it's no, we have a specific idea. There's a piece of inspiration that we want to guide our living room, or there's a way that we want to feel, or there's an image that we saw that we want to emulate, right? So it's you're really kind of honoring what your client wants, and that they have some thoughts about design, but they don't have the time or the expertise, right? So how much of how much of this came from really getting clear on your your ideal client? Is that really what kind of guided this?
So I think, if we go back to the two parts of creating your design system from the beginning, or the process, is number one, what do you want? And number one, what does your ideal client want? So I think you have to start with what you want, because this system is developed to support my lifestyle, right? I don't tend to do a lot of full service renovation projects. I don't tend to do design build projects. Again, this method still works for that, but that's not how I wanted to operate. So for clients who wanted somebody to be boots on the ground on the project 24/7, that just was not how I wanted to work from my perspective. So that is what helped to shape my ideal client. So my ideal client is well suited to being someone who wants to have their hands in the process, but they're still busy enough where I recently, just a new client that I signed, and she said, Misty, the problem is I love doing this. I really enjoy it, but I just have had to come to terms with the fact I don't have the time to do it.
Oh, uh-huh.
And that's a big part of like when people come to me is it's not that they don't have the money for it. It's not that they don't have, I mean, most, we do push their boundaries a little bit. So I think a lot of times people end up not going all the way in on their design because they get afraid. They're afraid to pull the trigger. I say my tagline is getting you out of the gray zone. And I think a lot of my clients don't want to be in the gray zone, but they end up getting there because they're afraid to make some of those bolder decisions.
Yeah.
And so they'll come to me and say, I don't have time. And I know what I want, but I'm really afraid to put all this hot pink in my room, for example, whatever.
Oh, right. Like the expertise to make those bolder choices,
Yes.
right? Like
So
how am
they
I gonna
don't
pull
end up
this
in the
off?
gray zone. Yeah. But
Yeah.
that's a great point, is the fact that knowing how I wanted to work then helped me to identify the kind of client I wanted to serve. And once I knew who that client was, it made it so much easier to be able to put that process in place to be able to support them. So
Mhm.
starting there is important.
Yeah, makes sense. So obviously, like kind of coming up with, if somebody wants to like develop their own, better method of collaboration, like this stretches across all these different templates and guides and processes, like what would you say is like the first, like, first 3 steps to take, like in terms of like developing things? I know they need to get clear on what they want, get clear on what their target audience wants, but then like what should they do next in terms of like implementation, or like come up with this guide first or this pricing sheet first? What's like a good like kind of first step in terms of like actions?
The best first step, I think, is to sit down and write out a list of everything you're willing to do and what does your client have to do. So like for my services, the one option is you can buy 2 hours of time or 4 hours of time, and I will either virtually or come to your home, do an in-person consultation. There's no homework afterwards. You literally just get me for the 2 or 4 hours I'm there. We'll talk about whatever you want while I'm there. That's it. And I'm very clear about what those options offer. The second option is me only providing a plan. So we still work the process very much the same up to the point where I deliver the plan. And then after plan delivery, they're responsible for purchasing the items on their own. They're responsible for styling, the whole 9 yards. And then the third option is by providing full service design, where we handle everything from start to finish. So when I was putting together these 3 service levels for my own client experience, I had to get very clear on what is it I'm going to be doing versus what I'm asking the client to do. So for that middle tiered service, for example, I'm very upfront from the beginning that the client is responsible for measuring and providing photos and giving me all the information that I need to be able to put together that initial floor plan. You want me to do all the heavy lifting? You're going to have to pay for it. That's full service, right? So once you're able to put together what it is you're doing, what it is they're doing, that is the linchpin for everything else, because you build off of that information. So if you don't know who's going to be doing what, how do you know how to price your services? So now I know that if I'm doing full service, I have to account for travel. I have to account for more travel because I'm going at least 3 times to the client's home for the measuring, for the conceptual design. I call it a design kickoff meeting, and then to installation. So a minimum of 3 times. And then how long is it going to take me to measure for each of those spaces that I'm designing? How long is it going to take me to design each of the space? I mean, all the things. So then you're able to go through and break down how long it's going to take you to do each of those projects. And that information allows you to build everything else. So like once you know how much it costs, then you can start to put in the steps that lead to that part of those parts of the process, right?
Yeah.
Measuring comes first. Here's what you need to know about measuring. Here's when I'll be here. Here's how long it's going to take me. Here's how long it's going to take after I get measurements for me to develop your initial conceptual design. So it really is, like I said, the starting point, the linchpin. Everything else kind of waterfalls after that.
The division of labor. Love it.
Mm-hmm.
So get clear on your division of labor for like your specific services.
The other thing that I would say is super helpful and was really a big game changer for me, was putting together my budget. You can get this on my website. It's CoCreativeInteriors.com. At the bottom, there's a place you can input your email address, and it's for my clients because I want them to have an idea of how much things are going to cost so that they don't have sticker shock. So I give this, that my complete budget breakdown for them is available there, and you're welcome to download it too. But it's broken out by room, and then it rolls up into a full total on like a total page. So you can see an aggregate of how much the entire project is going to cost. And it is detailed. Like I don't do square footage. I don't do no, like I want to know if I'm thinking the sofa is going to cost me $3,500, then I'm going to put that in there. And then a coffee table is going to cost me $1,500. I'm going to put that in there. Like, and then I'll have an actual total. I feel like I have to do this when I'm doing the project anyway. So why not just do it up front, be completely transparent with the client. And I've had a lot of people come to me after I'll send them the proposal with this full breakdown, and they'll say, I thought you were crazy when you told me this is going to cost me $50,000 for one room.
Right.
And then I looked at the numbers and it makes so much sense. Like nothing is outrageous. It's just because they've never pulled together information for an entire design before, right? So that's why I think the transparency, like sometimes I felt myself erring away from transparency because I was afraid to scare them off. And it might not have scared them off. I might have landed the client, but then halfway in the project, they're like, wait a minute, this room's $50,000. I'm like, yeah.
Right.
Well, we didn't talk about that. So then that was a problem.
Right.
That's the other big thing to nail down, just for your own purposes, to kind of have an idea of how much a project is going to cost. But then that really has been a game changer in terms of setting expectations for the clients.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. And then from there, you can go forward and create, your guides and like for the specific services. And that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. How do you deal with super indecisive clients, the ones that just don't want to make a choice and they've had 20 paint samples painted on their living room wall for 3 months?
This is where you have your services clearly outlined and what you're willing to include. My design services include one full round of revisions, and you're required to send me all the revisions you want to see in one full writing. So I'm not getting 20,000 texts with all the things you thought about in the middle of the night that you might want me to include when I'm redesigning your project. Nope.
And that's even for your full service.
That's for both of my full service and my mid-tier service plan. You get one full round of revisions. So theoretically, like I could have to start completely from scratch. Like if a client was like, I hate all of this and you have to completely blow it up. Technically, by my contract, I would be required to do that. It doesn't happen because we're typically on the same page, but they have one round of revisions. They're required to give me that complete writing in 1 week. They have 1 week to get me their information back. If it goes over a week, or if they don't give it to me in one writing, then I bill them hourly for their revisions. And that usually stops that real quick. And if it doesn't stop it, I'm getting paid for the time. So I don't mind as much. And this is where your contract and your proposals are so critical, is you are telling them what to expect before you get started. If you're not clear, then they can twist things around on you because you didn't very clearly say what the expectations were. So it will say, if your revisions aren't to me within a week, and you can make as many as you want, you just have to pay me for them, but this will affect your timeline. So you might have to wait for 2 more months to get your project complete because I have other clients who are making decisions faster, and it is my responsibility to keep their project on time. So again, that's where process is helpful, because if you have your process, you know about how long it should take you to be able to make these changes and to turn things around.
Yeah. So we're also getting questions on how you price these 3 tiers. Like, so if you could share as much info as you're open to sharing, whether that's your actual pricing or just how you're actually charging, like, is it hourly? Is it like flat rate? And then also, when are you billing? Like, are you getting payments up front for like each service? Like, so if you could just share as much as you want about how you're pricing these 3 tiers.
Sure. I do flat fee pricing. I think that goes a long way with building client trust. So it's, again, central to my core value of transparency with my clients. So I can tell them up front, you'll know how much you're expecting to invest from the beginning, and that's that. You cannot do that, though, and not lose your shirt without a process. So I know I'm hammering home on this process idea, but if you're going to do flat fees, you have to know how long each part of the process is going to take you, so that you aren't doing way more work than you should be doing for what you're getting paid to do. So for my consult type of service, it's $800 for 2 hours or $1,500 for 4. And then generally speaking, there is ebbs and flows to this based on things like travel time, complexity of the project. If I'm designing 1 or 2 pieces for a foyer versus redesigning an entire family room. Obviously, there's different levels of service, but generally speaking, my middle tier design package does not start for less than $4,500 per space. And I define a space as anything that can be enclosed by 4 walls. If there's no walls, if you could enclose it by 4 walls, that would be considered a space. And then we adjust based on how much support that they need and how big the spaces are. Which is where the budget can be really helpful, because when you're breaking down, like if I'm breaking down a family room and I know that I'm having to find 20 pieces to finish out this family space versus the little nook in their breakfast area that I have to find like 3 pieces, it's a lot easier for me to ballpark about how long I think it's going to take me to pull together a design.
Right.
There's always a little bit of wiggle room there. So you've heard of this contingency. So like a contractor will tack on a contingency of like 10% to make sure that they have their pricing in line. I usually tack on a 10% hourly contingency to make sure that I have wiggle room in that as well. And then
and that's hidden.
Hidden. Yeah, it's just built into the design fee.
Right.
And that is tracking is key. So I track everything I do for all of my projects, and from travel time to design time to client collaboration time, even to time that I'm collaborating with trades. Because I was doing a study because one of my trades like exponentially increases the amount of time on my projects, and it does not need to be. And so I had to have a conversation with him to be like, look, either we have to fix your systems are causing my systems problems. So either you got to get your system in check, or I'm going to have to charge you for the time. It's not fair to my client to have to charge my client more when you're the one who's a hot mess. So tracking has allowed me to have those conversations and to make sure that my flat fees are what they're supposed to be. Caveat, it does not include project management. So if I'm doing a full service design or something that does have more renovation heavy type of work to it, then I do tell the client that's project management. And you always have to frame things and like, what's better for the client? How does this benefit me? Ultimately, that's everybody's question is, what's this going to do for me, right? You don't want me to charge you a flat design fee for something like project management, because I might overestimate, because things tend to go wrong. So I only charge you hourly for what I absolutely have to do to keep your project on track. If you need me, some clients are like, I don't even need project management. Like I've got it all handled as long as you kind of give me the basic design plan. So that way I don't get stuck with some of those trickier situations where you truly can't manage a flat design fee because you have no idea how long it's going to take.
Right. Yeah. So you're only pitching a flat fee for what you kind of know you can control and what you already know to do. And so you're also doing like a lot of upfront work in terms of like, okay, how many pieces are going to be in this space? So you're getting like a pretty accurate proposal as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. So somebody's asking, am I crazy for not wanting my client to know anything at all? That way I'm able to create without limits. So I feel like there's a few kind of interesting questions in here, right? It's like, how can you involve clients, but then still feel like you don't have limits on your design? And then there's also an aspect of like, well, maybe this person's ideal client actually doesn't want to be involved, right? So what's your thoughts on that? How have you kind of run into this, or how do you approach that?
So you still get the creative freedom leading up to this initial design meeting, the design kickoff meeting or the conceptual design meeting. And that's really where you can go crazy. This is why I say it's important to kind of get your floor plan nailed down, because that dictates so much of the space. And then it's also important to get your big pieces that like you're really passionate about incorporating into the design. I want you to be able to have the information you need to be able to confidently go in and sell this project with such enthusiasm that the client can't help but get on board. So I always use wallpaper because I'm a wallpaper girl. But when I pull wallpaper, I'm like, can you imagine this wallpaper in here? It's going to look so good. It's going to make such a difference. And then if we paint out these built-ins in this beautiful blue color, it's going to pop off of this wallpaper. And it almost becomes a show. That's not the right word for it, but it is fun. Like my clients get really into it and they feel the excitement. And because I put together this plan ahead of time without having to go through. So here's the thing, like I would go for these design meetings and be like, well, I found this perfect sofa that's the exact size it's supposed to be, But then something changed and it changed all the other pieces. And I'd spent all this time finding things when I really just needed to make sure that my conceptual vision was on the right track for them.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's easy to get people excited about. They don't care how long their sofa is going to be, but they sure as heck care whether or not they think it's going to look pretty or be functional. So I would say design it still as though you are the designer. I like I heard somebody say, well, they should let me just design and let me work their magic. I'm like, well, yeah, like that's why they hire me, because I work my magic. They wouldn't hire me if I didn't. That's what I'm saying. This doesn't mean that you're giving up control. Collaboration does not mean you're giving up control. It just positions you so that you have the ability to sell this project with such enthusiasm and then get ahead of their objections. So you don't spend time creating this beautiful vision and then sell it to them and they're like, we hate it. Like,
yeah.
What do you mean you hate it? I delivered a beautiful design baby for you. What are you talking about?
Right.
I just find that it's so much easier to get them on board when you get them involved at this point in the game. And then they do trust you with that creative freedom because they're like, okay, yeah, like when I had a client recently and she's like, Misty, she's like, clearly you've got this. Like, I like what I see. We had to adjust a couple of things based on what she had envisioned for the space. And she's like, yeah, just let me know when you're done with it and we'll run with it. So
yeah,
that's like part one answer to that question.
Right.
The other question is, like what if they don't want to be involved and they have to give sign off, right? So my clients really aren't involved beyond this conceptual design. And that's because they're busy, right? That's why I structured my process the way I did. They didn't want to have to come to countless meetings. They're like, okay, you've got this. You just go and do your thing. I completely trust you. But you have to have at least one meeting to make sure that they have given sign off on the project. So that I don't think that you could make this as involved as you wanted to make it, or you could do it like I have and streamlined it to hopefully be one design meeting, two if you absolutely have to have it. So yeah.
Right. And that centers around the floor plan. So you're like getting kind of like maybe some models in there that are similar to what you want, but not necessarily the exact thing. Is that right? Like you're getting the big pieces in the floor plan.
Yeah, the big pieces and then those make or break design elements. Yeah.
Okay, got it. Or like like a lighting, like really essential lighting, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, so let's see. Also, somebody's asking if you are sourcing like trade only furnishings and if you're also kind of like boosting your profits through trade.
Such an interesting question. So for my mid-tier level of design, I source a lot of retail because I'm not involved in delivery of that project. So I'm just putting together the design. I have, however, sort of hacked the system a bit in a way by offering trade-only resources for that mid-level design option for things that can be shipped directly to the client. So it goes back to like, what is my client responsible for doing? They are responsible for inspecting the items. They know when they have to do it. They know they have a timeline for doing it. They know if they don't do it by that timeline and something's wrong, not my problem. That's on you. This is in my contract. It's in my proposal, the whole 9 yards. So I'll sell them things that are easy to sell that have minimal problems. Wallpaper, for example. Love wallpaper. Lighting. There's a couple of vendors that do drop ship. So I'll have things drop shipped to the client's home. But again, they're responsible for doing all of the inspection and receiving, managing packaging, all that kind of stuff. And it's something I created a guide for. So I have a guide for that where I send it to my clients to say, just so you know, if you're signing up for this level of service, this is what's required. They have to initial the contract to say, I am responsible for inspecting the whole thing. And then for full service, I mostly just source from trade because why not, right? I think this also depends on how you want to work. I personally hate sourcing upholstery. I find it very annoying. It's so detail oriented that you have to be on top of it or it's easy to make a mistake. Right now it's me and one other person on my team. So sometimes I'll source retail upholstery because it's just easier for me to do it. And the amount of time it saves me is not always worth the upside. There are other times when I do source upholstery. So I just kind of make that decision on the back end based on the client and the project and how smoothly things are going. But I tend to source way more from trade for my full service projects.
Makes sense. So how about like, just if you don't mind going over just like 5 minutes? Got a few more minutes? Okay. I'll pull a few more questions. So are you charging for your initial design consultation? Obviously, if they're just like, yeah. So you have the first, like a discovery call, and then they would maybe just do your hourly, which is around $400 an hour, or you would charge them for a longer consultation if they were a candidate.
So I have two, I have consultations and I have assessments. So a consultation is paid. And that is me coming in and I'm truly consulting with you to help you with whatever design questions it is that you have. A design assessment is required for my mid-level and full service design services. And they are both paid. They are $500 virtual assessment. I do not credit that towards my design fees. The fee is the fee because I do develop such a detailed proposal that they're getting value from it simply by what I'm delivering. I think that's one of the keys of calling it an assessment as opposed to a consultation is I'm assessing whether or not you need a certain level of a design service. It's so funny. I don't know if the rest of you guys run into this, but people will be like, I just need finishing touches, or I just need a few things. And then like in reality, they need the whole room. They don't just need anything. They need everything. And so the assessment puts me in the position of having to assess the space. Where are they? What do they need? And then make a prescription as to what it is they need from a level of service. And so someone says, I think I just need the design plan only. And then I come into this space and I'm like, I really think that based on everything you've told me, full service would be the best route for you to take. And here's why. And then if they don't choose that option, they don't choose that option. But as the professional, it's my responsibility to give them what I think is the best solution to their problems. So yeah, it's paid. It's $500. It's an hour long, typically 60 minutes that we do virtually. If somebody wants me to come in person, then they just do the $800 consult or the $1,500 consult. And then we can move into either of them from there. I don't ever have people do that though. They start with the $500 assessment and then
that makes perfect sense. And like you said, covers the time for that detailed proposal. And because that's a lot of time. And then they're getting the value of like, okay, what is this project really? What is this going to require? That makes a lot of sense.
Especially because I include trade quotes and stuff as well. It's not exact quotes, but I've developed relationships with my partners. And so I have one who does the majority of my carpentry. And so I'll call him and be like, hey, we need bookcases flanking a fireplace. We most likely need to reface the front of the fireplace. What are we estimating that this is going to cost? And so he'll ballpark it for me. Again, communication comes into play where you have to explain to the client, this is an estimate. He has not laid eyes on this project, but to at least give you an idea. So again, I'm not designing built-ins for a project where a client cannot afford built-ins. So when I'm going for the conceptual design and I'm like, well, the built-ins are going to cost around $4,500 around that. And we don't have them in the budget. How do you want to proceed? Oh, we're just not going to do built-ins. Okay, cool. I don't have to design them now.
Makes perfect sense. Okay, I'm going to get into 2 more questions. So second to last is, what are you reviewing at your $800 consult? Like, are you doing a walkthrough and just giving ideas? Or are you maybe saying like this type of product? Like, what are you able to achieve with those?
Anything I can leave them with at the end of the time that we spend together. So it's up to 2 hours. So like if you only get me for 30 minutes, you're like, oh, I don't have any more questions. Well, your 90 minutes don't roll over to another session, right? So it's up to. I will whip out my design files on my computer and we'll like rough map out some of the different floor plan options that they could put together. I will try to kind of source items if they have something in mind or we're looking at a specific piece. Then I'll try to find options for that piece. But again, only what we can do in those 2 hours. I don't go home and then do any additional sort of wrap up after the consultation is over. So it's not like I'm taking all the information that I pulled together during that consult, packaging it up in an email and sending it out. No. It's basically what happens there. And so a lot of times though, I will book it for 2 hours and then people will say, can you stay longer? So I'll leave another 2 hours after and just book them out to the full $1,500 visit if that's what they end up wanting or needing. And then sometimes people will be like, yeah, this was helpful, but I really just need you to do it. And so
right. And then you go, and then
they end up becoming a client. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Got it. Thank you. That's helpful. And so lastly, a couple questions in this one, but it's really around like proactive client updates. So how do you handle clients that say you said something, but it didn't end up happening? Like you said the install would happen next week. You said install would happen next week, but you never told them that. And then are you using email only? How do you handle clients that want an update almost daily? So I got a little confused by that question, but I think it's really like, how are you handling these kind of, I guess it comes into the project management, right? How are you communicating? And then how are you kind of like charging for that communication?
So I just try to automate as much as possible. It's just the name of the game, I think, is automation in this day and age, especially if you're more of a solopreneur or have a small team. And one of the things I love DesignFiles for so many reasons, but one of the things I like about DesignFiles is once I've developed a product list, you can export that product list. And so we use that information to develop a Google spreadsheet, and we upload it into a Google spreadsheet, which is, always live, always updating. So as things are delivered or received, whatever, then we just track that for our own purposes. So we know what the heck's going on with our own project. And we send a weekly email that is automated from our Dubsado client system that's like, hey, checking in with your weekly update. They also are able to input any information that they have going on their end of things. So like I have one that's like if they have to order something on their own, again, doesn't happen often, but if they're going to order something, then it will be retail order, and then trade orders or things we're managing. And then I'll have a separate tab for services. And so I'll put like, wallpaper installation, and then list all the information for that project. And then they can go in and update when it's been scheduled, when it's been completed, that kind of thing. And those are clients who want to manage it on their own. If I'm managing it, I still put it on the spreadsheet, and then on the email it gets out that they receive, it just says, here's your weekly update. Click on your link to see what's been going on. And then
I love that. Yeah. Spreadsheets are still very, very useful for many things.
Yes. Especially when it's on the cloud.
Yeah. Like don't overcomplicate it.
And it updates itself automatically. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. I'm in Google Sheets all the time. Love it. That makes perfect sense. So thank you so much for presenting this content and answering our questions. I'm popping Misty's information up here one more time in case anybody wants to screenshot it and reach out. Yeah, thank you again so much for joining us and diving into all these details.
Thank you for having me. And if anybody has questions, feel free to reach out to me on Instagram. I'm happy to help however I can do so. And I do offer a free systems assessment. So if you just want someone to walk you through your systems, where you're finding that you're hitting stuck points, I'm happy to do that for you as well. It's just systems are another passion of mine. So my two worlds of design and my strategic management worlds colliding. So just know that that's available as a resource too.
Awesome. Thank you. We're getting lots of comments on how helpful this was. So thanks again. And everybody, we will see you next month for our monthly workshop. Bye.
Bye.